Well, Fallen's now over. What'd you guys think?
Well, while you and I were hard at work bringing honor and glory to the club, and we ran a fantastic 4-session Stalingrad game about which we will spew and pontificate later. Greg had a camera and was flitting about from table to table like a gadfly. Greg, why don't you tell us all the cool things you saw?
Scufflaw.
Jeez. Wow, that's what a guy gets for not running a game at this convention, huh? Yeah, well, while you guys were scraping up all the awards with Stalingrad, I did get to go around and look at a lot of other tables. Of course, as always, there's tons of games that we didn't get to see because there are literally hundreds of events that get run at Fallen. But there were definitely some highlights that I got to see. One that jumped out right away on Friday was a 28mm Pegasus Bridge table with a chain of command scenario. Tons of custom terrain on that table. A beautiful model of the bridge itself. That was a really, really impressive display.
One game that really jumped out to my mind was Pearl Harbor. It was a full-scale model of the entire harbor, the surrounding area, and every Japanese plane involved in the attack. I think there were 250 little teeny plane models.
That's, I mean, top 5 convention games I think I've ever seen. Because it's something I've never seen before.
I'm Patrick Woodard. You might remember me from the Hampton Roads episode last year. I've jumped forward in history a little bit, and I just finished running my long-term convention game, Tora Tora Tora. I replicated the entire harbor and Hickam Field on a 6-foot by 4-foot table. I have every aircraft that was over the harbor, all over 250 individual airplanes. I also have every individual ship that was in the harbor, plus or minus 3 or 4. Over 70 ships. All of the players play as the Japanese because playing as the Americans is no fun. You don't do anything. So I solved the problem by making myself be the Americans. All of my players are Japanese. Fuchida, Shimazaki, Takahashi. I'm using a set of rules, a set of free rules called Table Air Combat, or TAC. I say free because the rulebook itself is available for free on Wargame Vault. But you buy the individual airplanes that you want. So if you're only interested in the Pacific, you can buy a Wildcat and a Zero. Scale of the planes in this scenario is 1/1200 scale. The scale of the ships is 1/2400 scale. The scale of the terrain is roughly 1/3000 scale, because that was the only way I could fit it onto the 6x4 but still have it not be super tiny. And playing with tiny planes is just no fun.
One of the other games that stood out for me, one of our Patreons, Brad Shafi, brought a Siege of Carthage game, a 6mm game, some fantastically painted Bacchus miniatures, 3D printed and resin casting model of Carthage that was just absolutely stunning.
That one turned a lot of heads at the convention. Yeah. I don't think anybody walked past that table without like doing a double take.
And this one where two of the best games we saw were very small scale.
Small footprint, small scale.
But big on the terrain features and quite impressive.
Yeah, there were also just a lot of like really big scale games here, like physical footprint games. There was a gangster game that was up near the registration table that was, I don't know, it had to be like an 18-foot long table.
With the big tramp steamer.
Yeah, the steamer.
Miles and I were...
Yeah, was it 6 feet? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Miles and I were looking at the steamer this morning. There was no one around, and so we had a chance to closely inspect. And
we're trying to figure if we could take parts to get in the interior, and we didn't want to pull too hard because it didn't look like it could. But it was very well done.
That was a great table. There was another table, maybe not quite that long, of a Brazen Chariot scenario from the attack on Moscow in 1941, World War II winter table. Just, again, some really impressive terrain on there. So one of the more interesting games that I got a chance to take a look at was the Dunn-Kempf table. And the story behind that table is that it was actually created by the U.S. Army in the 1970s. And it's a topographic map of an area in Germany for Cold War gaming. And apparently the Army was going to throw it away. And a gamer managed to somehow intervene and get their hands on this historic wargaming table.
Wow.
And it's metal. It's like a solid cast piece in metal. So like, I'm standing there tapping on the thing, and it just a really neat piece of history to be able to see in person at a convention like this.
Nice.
A much more modern-looking table was an 1883 ambush of an Egyptian column moving through on the Mahdi War. That was a table that had a lot of players gathered around. They looked like they were having a really good time. Speaking of players gathered around having a good time, the Stalingrad table looked rather raucous. So what ended up happening in the linked scenarios?
Well, we played 4 scenarios, and the end of one game would be the start of the other game, and it was a swirling battle. I think the Universe Mag department store changed hands every game.
Sometimes more than once.
Sometimes more than once in a game. The end, both sides had taken almost all their objectives. The Germans were kind of cut off, but they won on points. They won the final campaign 102 to 100 in a nail-biter of a session featuring sewer movements, and I think we had roughly 45 players over the course of the campaign. And
it always looked full.
We did take a couple of minutes between sessions 3 and 4 of Stalingrad to zip down to the vendor hall. The vendor hall, while in another location, is a gorgeous space in its own right. Miles got a chance to get down there as well, did you?
I didn't pick up anything, but I've got a lot of ideas to go back, but I thought the vendor hall was really nice. And one thing I noticed that the vibe for the whole con was very positive.
I think part of it it's a familiar venue.
Yep.
You know, for many, many years, HMGS conventions have been held at what was called the Lancaster Host, but after a seeming 10-year renovation, is now the Wyndham. And the facility does look so much better than it used to, but it has advantages of being familiar, of having tons of parking and accessibility. A couple disadvantages, though, one of which you kind of mentioned, Tony, the zipping down to the vendor hall. The vendor hall's a pretty decent hike away from this building. Common complaint that I heard among people is that it felt a little bit too detached from the main venue here.
Well, and on the way back, when you have an armload of goodies, it is also uphill.
It's not as nice as the Marriott in Lancaster.
No.
Convention center, especially with dining choices.
The food, honestly, to me, the biggest drawback of the whole thing was the food situation here. I mean, the bar is up and running. They do have food carts and stations where you can get food, but it just doesn't compare to being downtown where you could walk out the door and there were like 10 restaurants.
But I would certainly come back here for another convention without hesitation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of all the possible options for hosting a convention, this is not the worst choice they could pick.
This is one of the first conventions, we were talking about this at dinner tonight, that I can remember in a long time, where I spent a meaningful amount of time at Hobby University. I think for a lot of gamers here, Hobby U is a bit of an afterthought because so many people are coming here to game. Right. I certainly know for my sake it's been an afterthought. I've actually never taken a class at Hobby U. So when I came up here, I got to meet the new manager of Hobby U, who I think has brought a breath of fresh air into this program. And it was neat to see the variety of classes that were being offered, not just on painting and airbrushing, but also on terrain modeling, 3D printing. I got to sit in on part of a class where they were working on some terrain modeling, and actually a great tip that I'm going to steal for my own sake. I had asked, like, how did you weather? They're making wooden buildings like you would see in Wild West. And the weathering was really sharp looking. I was like, how'd you paint that? And the guy teaching it said, well, actually, it's just the craft store sticks that you get, like, you know, at Joann Fabric. And he dips them in black wash. And that's it. They're not painted at all. Just straight, uncut black wash. And the final effect was absolutely awesome. So I'm thinking at the next show, I might sign up for Hobby U and maybe take a class or two, because I think there's a lot of value here for people.
Hobby U is a free resource that you can come in and learn everything from Napoleonics and flag building to doing competition painting if you want to. I go to ReaperCon, they charge $35 for the same Dirty and Distressed class I teach here. Hobby U is dedicated for building that hobby up all the way through. So you're getting an immense value of instructors that you're not going to get anywhere else without paying a heavy price for it.
So it was all in all a great convention. There were a lot of great games. There were a lot of vendors this year. We got to see friends old and new,
Yep.
share a drink, push some miniatures, have a laugh.
Yeah, a beautiful weekend outside, which for a gamer, of course, means a great time to spend inside, indoors, shying away from the natural light.
We got to see a lot of our patrons, which is always a pleasure. Some of them were in our games, and we're very, very appreciative of their support. I think this is probably the best fall-in I've ever been to.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yep, definitely.
Yeah. I think the team at HMGS did a great job putting on this convention, and I think,
I would
it's
agree.
all a volunteer organization. It's really hard, and I think we should all, give them our thanks for a job very well done.
And from all of us here at Little Wars TV, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you had a great time at the convention. Be sure to like and subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts on the convention and your experience here today.
And vote for Austerlitz.